All right, we are back with another installment of Accepting the Challenges, here where we want to shine a light and give some spotlight, if you will, to different folks all across the education spectrum, from superintendents to principals to teachers to counselors to people in the education business. And today's guest kind of fits a little bit of all of that. A very unique background and almost a flip flop of
Mm.
what we're seeing a little bit in the turnover. Whereas we might have some teachers who have been teaching for 10, 15 years and then deciding to get out and go into the business world or go into the private world, she's actually done the opposite. So today's guest is Jenny Schmitt. And Jenny, if you will, introduce yourself a little bit and maybe talk a little bit about your journey and kind of where you grew up, how you started, and then kind of how that led you into education.
Oh, okay. That could take up the whole hour, but I'll try to
We've
I'll
got
try to
time.
make it
Don't
brief.
don't worry about the time constraint. We can go for as long as we need to.
Okay. All right. So I was a my father was a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. So I grew up in a military family. We moved every 3 years. I think I was exposed to a lot of different educational um, styles simply from having moved so much. But I actually started my career in sports marketing. I actually worked for the Olympic movement for a long time, and then I went on to work for an NBA team, and knew I wanted to be in business, knew I wanted to do things, in the business world, had a real acumen for that, a real mind for that. But what happened was over my career, and so I built a career. I left sports, I entered into healthcare marketing and communications, stayed in the corporate world for a while. And then I thought, a lot like you, I started my own business. I was like, I need to work for myself. I need to do this for myself. And I had a very successful company. In my eyes, very successful, but a successful company. And then we made the decision, our family, my husband and our two daughters, to move to California for a job opportunity for him. And so I closed down my company. I actually sold off my assets and closed my company and moved to California. And I thought, okay, this is Silicon Valley. Plenty of marketing opportunities here, plenty of communication opportunities. But everything I kept looking for, Shane, was, I don't know, it felt like it was a pull away from anything passionate for me, a pull from anything exciting. And there's exciting things happening here in Silicon Valley, but it just wasn't resonating with me. And so I took time and I thought, okay, what's going on here? And what I found was that what I enjoyed most about my job was the sense where I was teaching or training people, or I was helping clients learn things. And I found myself saying, okay, well, I'm also seeing with my young employees that I had that they weren't coming in with the educational skills that I needed. They thought that Google was a primary source and I had to, or helping them to write basic things. And I thought to myself, putting all of this together, and this is I probably took 6 months of this, of really trying to decide. And I think trying to accept the challenge really of saying, I think I want to teach. And I think I want to teach younger students, not at the college level, but I wanted to be in the either primary or secondary level. I think your wife actually teaches one of the younger grades. Yes.
So she's in middle school. So she
Yeah.
teaches middle
Okay.
school special education.
Okay. So I'm in middle school is where I landed. And I made that decision. I made this kind of leap of faith of saying, this pulls from the best of my skills, but I want to give back. I don't want to be marketing another product while it's exciting, I think that excitement had left me. And I really found myself wanting to give back and invest and have my work have more meaning than what it did before. Not that my work in corporate land didn't have meaning, but I think it's very different, let's say, when you're building a fan base for a sports team, as opposed to educating and really lighting up a child's mind with the possibility of, wow. So that's a very compressed version of that. But more than 20 years in the business world, flip that over. And, I'm a late career changing, professional who's changed. And I didn't just shift from a small career into a related career. This was really kind of a 180 for me. And it is very different because you see a lot of teachers getting out now and going into instructional design or consultants for companies. And I was like, I want to be with students. I want to be in the thick of it. So that was the romantic notion, right? Of I'll go into a classroom and teach. And then the reality of the work, it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's challenging. And it is a heck of a lot of work. It is a heck of a lot of work.
Absolutely. We have a one of our interviews coming up. I did with he's a colonel or was a colonel in the military and retired 30 years, and now he's gotten into teaching. And on there he says, he's like, look, being in a war zone physically is harder than teaching. Mentally, teaching is way harder mentally than being in the military. And he said he's had days where he's had to close the door and sit down and have a good man cry and let it go. And I think that's where teaching is so like, because I think maybe the word you were looking for when you were trying to describe, I know you said it's something that means more. Teaching is a very altruistic thing, right? Like it is. Most teachers are very servant oriented. They want to, they want to help. They actively want to. I think. I mean, I don't know. This may come off to some people wrong, but I think that's why a lot of females are very successful in it, because they have that motherly instinct. They have that want to that willing to sacrifice and put their own. Women are way better than men at putting their own emotions and different things aside and not allowing it to influence or affect what they're doing. And you have to do that as a teacher, because you're going to deal with some things that you don't know are coming, and you got to keep a face, and you've got to attack those challenges that come to you. What NBA team did you work with?
I worked for the Atlanta Hawks in the days of Dikembe Mutombo and Steve Smith and the guys back then. So, the whole finger wagging with Dikembe. So that was fun. It was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed my time in sports marketing. It's a very different experience behind the scenes of it,
Sure.
But it certainly was. And my job was, aside from the game operation side, was building youth fan base, so that was
awesome. So you were still impacting, from a social aspect, impacting the youth. Very, very different demographic in Atlanta.
Yes.
Than what you deal with now in Silicon Valley. Tell me what your experience is like for you moving to Silicon Valley and what that's been like.
That's a great question. California is very different. So I think I grew up mostly in the South. Like I said, my dad was in the military, so we've lived all over the place. But I had been in Atlanta for more than 20 years when we made the decision to move. And so it's definitely a culture shock coming here. I think, the South is just friendly.
I'd say, were you coming in more socially conservative into that, or was it now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need to adjust? And
I would say I'm more socially conservative than most of California, but that's not saying a lot because California really is kind of on the extreme.
Sure.
I don't like saying that because people don't like to hear that they're on the extreme, but it is incredibly progressive place to live. And it's not necessarily always progressive in a good way.
Sure.
I think a lot of times it's a rush to react here to whatever's happening culturally to appear to be moving at one step ahead of wherever that movement is. And so I would say we were more socially conservative but I think that's pretty easy anywhere you would go in California.
Sure.
But California in general, it's a gorgeous state. I mean, it's an absolutely gorgeous state, but it's a very different vibe out here than it is in the South. And so I think we had a little bit of adjustment issue of, you're walking along, in your neighborhood, and you say hello, good morning, and people kind of look at you like, I don't know you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's just a different vibe. Yeah. Why are you talking to me? But it's been a really interesting shift here to bring one, I think I always tell people I'm a Southerner in Silicon Valley because I bring that, and I haven't made myself a chameleon to being here. It's like, no, this is who I am. And so bringing that, like, hey, we hug and we say hello to each other when you don't know each other, and you hold the door open. I mean, even those common little things that you think are common are not common really outside of the South.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So kind of going back to your journey, was there, do you think you've always had something in you to want to be a teacher, or is it something that just developed as you kind of went through your career and you wanted to, there was a thirst, if you will, that you wanted to quench, and you weren't getting it, where you were at?
I think it developed over my career. I don't remember ever as a child saying I wanted to be a teacher, but I wasn't exactly a good student.
Sure, I can relate.
I was, I think I was probably, a little ADD. I was the kid always talking and acting up in class. And I was a jokester as well sometimes. But the funny thing is now I get to talk all the time in class. Sure. But I think it developed over my career. I think the first hints of it came when I was interacting with young people. And then I had started doing more training, and I started doing more having to teach on that side of it. And it really connected with me. Like, I found myself coming home from those moments and feeling the energy and feeling the vibe. So I think there were small hints along the way in my career. And so has there always been something inside of me? Probably. And I just didn't acknowledge it until later. But it was a very radical idea in my mind to say, I'm going to leave corporate world to go be a teacher. I mean, that's a huge professional shift. And we've talked about this a little bit, Shay, but the respect of teachers, or like you're at a dinner party and you meet someone who says, I work in corporate marketing versus I'm a teacher. There's a very different reaction you get from people. And so that was a big shift in my own mind, that I'm shifting to, be a teacher, and I make what I made in my 20s. Sure. I don't pull a big salary. I don't have a huge sway and influence. I don't have the latest campaign to talk about. Instead, I get to talk, about what I teach. Absolutely. And who I teach.
How was that conversation at home when you came up? Was that an ongoing discussion through the evolution, or did you sit down one day and say, honey, I think I want to teach?
It was the latter there. It was,
oh boy.
It was and it was well supported. And my husband's just been, Good. He's my biggest champion and biggest supporter. And I think it was more important. He saw that what I was doing in communications in the digital world just wasn't feeding a passion. It was feeling more like labor. And so he knew I was ready for a change. And I think he wasn't surprised when I said it. I think it made sense to him, but he knows me better than I know myself. So he saw that there as well. But I think the conversation, we had the conversation about what a hit from a financial it would be, but sure, it mattered more that it's fulfilling work. Absolutely. As opposed to, like you have a happier spouse, doing work that they love. So did you have to go back to school to get your teaching certification? So I am in the midst of getting my teacher certification. I initially got what is called your basic credentials here in California that allow you to substitute teach or to teach on a provisional. You're like a probationary kind of teacher. So I have my basic credentials and I'm working towards my credential, which is interesting. I already have a master's degree. I have a bachelor's of business, and then I have a master's degree in science, an MS. And yet I'm still required to go back and get another master's, yep. Which even with all of my experience, trying to be like, do I really need to go back to get another degree? And I don't think people realize that in general in the public, that most teachers you meet have a master's in teaching. That we've actually asked them to go get this extra education, incur this expense so that they can be the best for your child, that they can be the best teacher that they can be. And yet most people kind of overlook teachers as, oh, okay, yeah, you're a teacher.
Yeah.
So,
and then also we don't supplement that income to offset the expense of actually picking up that extra expense. But, no. So what subject do you teach? Do you teach a variety of subjects, or?
I'm all enclosed. So I teach everything but math. So I teach English, social studies. I'm at a Catholic school, so I teach religion. Okay. and I get to teach English language arts. So I teach their reading and reading comprehension and writing.
Awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
What is your favorite part about what you do?
Oh, every day is different. I love making the learning come alive. It was very different when I was taught. I was the kid. Now we know that there are visual learners and audio learners and, kids who learn best by writing or experiencing. And so I find these really fun and creative ways to help them grasp the lessons in different ways and telling them it's okay if you fail. I'm here. We're all going to fail at some point this year. So make the mistakes now. And it's this being this non-judgmental person who's helping. I'm hoping to light just a little bit of a flame, And I love that. And there's a whole lot of things. I get to teach American history. So, we're in an election year. This is
Sure.
This is crazy exciting for me. But I also get to do things like introduce kids I'm in middle school. So I use poetry to teach them writing. And at the beginning of the year, Shane, kids are like, oh, poetry. And by the end of the year, I even have my most reluctant students, they get it because in the earlier part of primary education, we teach kids these conformities, capital letter, punctuation, make a sentence, write an essay about the pumpkin patch, write this structured writing. And we've taken away the creativity of it and the expressiveness. And so when I tell my students, just write, they look for me to give them those boundaries. And I'm like, no.
Sure.
So I take those away. And in some ways it's freeing. In some ways it freaks them out a little bit.
Sure.
But there's little things like that I think, I feel like every day I just come away with, wow, this was exciting. Shane, I taught, they learn map reading skills. So, latitude is flatitude, just these silly things that, 20 years from now, they may or may not remember. And it doesn't matter to me if they remember me. What matters is that I helped ignite them a little further on the journey of learning.
Absolutely.
Because education is the one thing, it opens doors. And when you limit yourself, you don't really have those doors unless you've got other ways to persevere and find that. So I just always think about me in the classroom, kind of like you, Shane, probably. You think about that one, certain structured ways of learning don't work for all kids. And yet we expect them to conform and be in this box. And I'm like, let's break that apart. Let's do something different. And I love that. And I have a really supportive principal who says, try it. She's very supportive of my non-traditional background and very supportive as long as I'm teaching what I have to cover for the year. You want to try it? Try it. Let's see how it works.
That's good. That's good. Mm-hmm. So what are some things you have learned that have stood out in a supportive way that maybe some of your administration or your leadership team that you work with, what have they done to help your transition into, doing this?
Yeah. And I think it's a leap of faith that they took as well. I think to look at somebody with my background and think, why do you want to come into a classroom now? And with their background, they know the challenges of teaching. So they have been so supportive in a couple of different ways, in many different ways, but I'll just highlight a couple. One, it's this trust that I'm a grown adult and I know how to interact with children in an appropriate way. And so I don't have someone coming into my classroom observing me every day or every week, micromanaging. I don't have, my principal doesn't say, let me see your lesson plans. Now I say, hey, do you want to see these? Do you want to see what we're doing? And she's like, you're good. You're good. If you're teaching, if you're covering this, it's good. So I don't have this, make sure you get your paperwork on time and make sure I'm going to I'm going to make sure you're covering X, Y, and Z. There's a trust level that's there. Now, I think if I wasn't being successful in the classroom, they may have stepped in and said, let's take a look at your lesson plans.
Sure.
Now,
sure.
I did have someone in my first year coming in about every 2 weeks just to check in and, listen in and then offer feedback. The other way that they've been supportive is that every one of my fellow teachers is incredibly supportive. Like, hey, if I had a ridiculous question, and the nicest thing, I couldn't ask any stupid questions. They're like, ask away. All right, I have a student who's not turning in work. I know what my instinct says to do, but how do you approach this? How do you handle this? And every teacher around me in that environment, because the leadership has created this culture of trust and this culture of, I'm here to support you. We're here to support you. And we all do it. And it might be the healthiest place I've ever worked, quite honestly,
That's
in
awesome.
terms of, I
That's
think,
awesome.
support and trust. And there were no dumb questions from me.
That's
So
great.
like on a fire drill, even those kinds of things where you think, I don't know, am I supposed to lock the door behind me? Like, those
Sure.
types of things. And they come forward and say, I don't feel ridiculous for asking those questions. And they just help me learn that system. They help me learn about so many of the other things that schools do that we don't really acknowledge. And they've just been there to help me learn it all by saying, ask the questions, ask your fellow teachers. We're all here. We're all supportive.
That's great. That's great.
Mhm.
Sounds like it's a great culture,
It
which,
is. It is.
which is massively important, not just in schools from a workplace standpoint, but in any workplace.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I've talked to enough educators where not every place is like that, right? Not every, there's sometimes this air of, you know, like you said, micromanaging or constant judgment or,
Mhm.
you know,
Compare and control.
all yeah
You know?
all
Yeah.
these different things. So um did getting into, so you have kids, correct?
Yes, I have two daughters. Yeah.
Okay, how old are
And
they,
they're
if you don't mind me asking?
one's in fifth grade and one's in eighth grade. So I've got tween teen, which is crazy. So
Okay, so did you getting into education change your perspective on the education system and what your kids have been going through, and maybe some different viewpoints that you have?
absolutely. Well, I think I've always appreciated my daughter's teachers, like in the way that parents do, like, thank you for teaching my kid. But I don't think I really knew the amount of work that went into planning a half-hour lesson or an hour lesson, or how on the weekends they're doing XYZ, or in the summer, oh, you have your summers off. No, you don't. You might have no structured schedule, but you certainly do have things that you need to accomplish and do. And so I think just the appreciation of what it takes for them to be successful in the classroom to teach my kids, I think it was eye-opening. And I think it's been eye-opening for my daughters as well, because they see how much I put in, because I want to be a good teacher.
Sure.
I want my students to have a good experience and I want them to learn. And they see how much I'm putting in. So I think it's made them even appreciate their teachers even more. But absolutely. And especially with COVID and the, sheltering in place and distance learning, just knowing how much more work that is,
Sure.
in terms of preparation. So it definitely
Yeah.
was an eye opener. It was different from the parent of, oh, I know you work hard, to, holy cow, I can't believe you do this every week.
Yeah, no doubt. No, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you've been doing this for 20 years, right? You choose to do this.
I'm
So,
like, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think a lot of times, especially now, there's been this big, now here in Kentucky, we are, I guess we're open, I guess,
Mhm.
but it is a like a staged opening.
Yes.
As
Yeah.
so we're kind of tiered into that, small
Mhm.
gatherings. Now I have a feeling coming. So the Derby was this weekend.
I know. I saw. Yeah.
Everybody having get-togethers and doing what they shouldn't be doing and not social distancing. And then we've got Labor Day weekend and the weather's beautiful outside. I think it's 65 degrees this morning. It'll be mid 70s and nice.
Mhm.
You guys are getting a heat wave over there right now.
Yes. Yeah. 108 is not really conducive to
Oh,
grilling out. So
yeah, and it's
I'm
not
like,
normally 108 in Silicon
no,
Valley. So
no,
not
no.
even
This
in the
is really
dead of the summer.
no,
It's
no.
not
It's
that.
always pleasant and blue skies here. So
And
usually
horrible traffic.
horrible traffic, and we have wildfires and all
Yes.
kinds. There's always something happening in California.
So I think we're going to end up being back.
Mhm.
I think by the time flu season gets here and October gets here, I have a feeling we'll be back to some sort of shelter in place,
Mhm.
something. I don't know what it'll
Yeah.
be, and that's a narrative that because teachers are kind of the forgotten ones in the education system sometimes. And
Mhm.
it's it's almost like, you hear this narrative on social media, which social media is the toxic cesspool of the world right now.
Yes.
um you hear this there, oh well, teachers, they're lazy and they haven't been working, and like, look, like, I can assure you my wife would rather have her students in the classroom
Oh,
than
absolutely.
she would,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
she wants to do it safely, and she wants to, and
Mhm.
so then they change this whole narrative of, well, to appease the public, even if you're doing distance learning now, unless the
Mhm.
governor says you can't go to school, teachers still have to go and teach from their classroom, which
Mhm.
is crazy. Like, it's
Yeah.
2020. Like, what are we doing? Right? Like, this is not like, but I
Yeah.
think that's a change, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
I think it's a change, very much like where you live in Silicon Valley. It is known for disruption of, markets and
Mhm.
different industries and different things. I think that's what we're seeing, because I'll tell you, it just dawned on me. I guess maybe I knew it, but I just hadn't processed it. So I've got friends all over the world on social media, and I saw some friends in England, I saw some friends in Denmark, and I saw some friends in Spain. They all started school
Mhm.
in the last 2 weeks, and like, their kids are all doing distance learning, and I was like, holy cow, like, the whole world is distance learning. And
Mhm.
you know I believe in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be looking at an education system where students don't go sit in a classroom for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Mhm.
I think a lot of businesses are going to go to a remote or semi-remote, type
Yeah.
of environment, unless you have to be there. Obviously, if you work at a restaurant, you have to be there.
Right.
Those
Right.
things.
If you're making a car, you have to show up to manufacture
Sure,
that car.
sure.
Yeah.
So I think some of these industries are going to change. We knew they were going to change anyway. It's just a matter of now the acceleration of that change. And
Mhm.
it's pretty cool to see teachers kind of on the forefront of it, because what will happen is teachers will adapt. Teachers are massively, so you and I talked about some stuff off air before we got on about perseverance, and
Mhm.
teachers are massively resilient. You throw something at, I mean, think about it. We literally, teachers did not have any training to do online learning, and literally within 5 days, no, and I don't even know if they have 5 days notice. It was like,
We had
hey,
3. We had
yeah,
3.
hey, you're going
In the spring, we
Monday,
had 3.
you're going home, and you're not coming
Mhm.
back in the building. They say it's going to
Mhm.
be 2 weeks. Let's all use some common sense. You're done for the year.
Yep.
And I need you to start learning to teach from home.
Mhm.
Scramble, holy cow, what do I do? Are there going to be hiccups? Of course. Are there?
Mhm.
And instead of pointing out the negatives, let's point out the positives in this advancement of what they're doing. And they figured it out, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I can't
Yeah.
even tell you the conversations and different, like they figure it out. And
Yeah.
I think that's a cool part, about teachers, is they're massively resilient.
And you
Um,
kind of got a front row seat to that because you're watching your wife experience this as a teacher, and you kind of got the front row seat to see what, wow. I mean, we had 3 days in the spring to prepare, get materials to students at home, and to start teaching online. And part of me was, I'm new enough to teaching them, like, okay, it's just naive enough to be like, all right, we'll figure this out. And there's going to be hiccups, and there's going to be failures, and there's going to be missteps, but we're going to learn. The good thing with teaching is they seem to, as a profession, learn from each. The sharing in teaching is incredible. People say this worked, this didn't work. And it's also about, in the spring, for example, we kept our expectations just as high. Now we have grace for everybody, knowing that this was stressful. This is certainly going to be an impactful life event for all of us, but especially for students. But you have to maintain that expectation of learning. And it was really interesting to see, Shane, how this national conversation has come about. Everybody has an opinion on, should we open, should we not open? Are teachers just being lazy, right? How do we keep it safe? How do we do all this? But in the midst of it, teachers are like, you can keep talking about it. We're just going to keep doing.
yes, yes.
And that's it's, you adapt what you have, but you still have to teach and you still have to have those expectations. And I know I've seen articles that have said, online learning failed, but I think we have to be patient, especially with public school systems where they have to meet the needs of a lot of, just an hour from me in Salinas, California, there was it made national headlines, 2 children sitting outside of a Taco Bell to use their Wi-Fi to do their work. And I'm like, wow, we live in California, we live in Silicon Valley. And how do we make sure the internet is available for everybody? Or how do we create some accessibility for kids that don't have that at home? And those are questions bigger than asking teachers to solve them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we look at teachers to say, solve this for my child.
So I heard a retired teacher, there's kind of 2 parts to that. So I heard a retired teacher make a comment on a recorded board meeting that I watched. And, some people brought up, well, what do we do about the kids who are, dealing with some things at home? Or what do we do about the kids who are getting depressed? And she's like, look, I'm a retired teacher. I did this for 30 years. You're asking a teacher to now fill the void that something that our community and society should be pitching in and helping in. Like, they're not also psychologists. They're not like they're teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the narrative of, well, I heard a guy at a board meeting say something like, well, even if they just get them in there, even if they're not really able to teach them anything other than, the safety, and the lady was like, look, they're also not babysitters. Like, that's not what this is. So it's up to us. We have to provide the right opportunity and the right support system, and that's the thing. Like, teachers are like this Band-Aid. They've always been thrown. And teachers are everything from a parent to, a coach, to a counselor, to a therapist, to a disciplinarian, to all these different things, rather than teaching a subject or teaching life skills and these different things. And there's always this, teachers will figure it out. They'll go to school. Teachers will figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's this thing of, like, if we have to have a conversation that says kids can't go into school, so that's the reason that they're having increased suicidal thoughts or depression or different thing, maybe we should figure out how to put some things in place that are there whether they're school or not, because that means we're void of some of these things, and these things that need to be in place and need to happen. Go ahead.
Oh, right. Well, teachers we're front line with children. So we see the impact and effect that all this is having. So for example, this year, we're weaving in these social emotional learning and these opportunities for them to express what they're experiencing. And I have to do that for the health, because you can't teach a child that's fearful or scared or so stressed out. They're just, that pathway to learning isn't open.
Learn.
So we'll make those openings, but we're not, we're the front line, but we're not the end all be all solution for everything as teachers. And that's, sure. I think it's unfair. Like you said, I think we have to look culturally and say, what else can we put in place to support kids holistically, not just in school? And and for the people that say that kids can't learn online or make social connections, I'm like, listen, there are people that dated online,
sure,
met online and have married and are successful.
Yes.
We can handle the social online. Kids will find their way to be social. That's just their nature of it. Is it different? Yeah.
It's not by chance. It's not by chance that we're in a generation where they're learning online every day, right? They're on their iPad. They're playing video games.
YouTube is their jam. They like YouTube.
FaceTime. They FaceTime each other. They talk. They don't send text messages. Adults are the one that send text messages. That's old. That's ancient to to kids. They FaceTime, and it's so, rather than, and I used to talk about this when with my previous business and traveling around, and I would tell parents, like, and we talk about the dangers of social media, and like, this is more dangerous than a gun. Yeah. And when you talk about, like, hey, it's not that we should take all this technology away from kids. Let's actually educate ourselves as adults and parents, and let's figure out how to teach them how to use it. Because if they're going, I have a 4-year-old. He 100% is going to grow up in a world, by the time he graduates high school, he will not be using a pen and paper. It will not be happening. Right. 15 years from now, the paper industry, we'll have more trees than we know what to do with, because we will not be printing paper.
Yeah.
So it's in this world of let's provide let's provide them with the education they need. So to the other piece to this, and I believe this, I believe that there's
Mhm.
actually a part of it that there's things that they're learning that are far more valuable
Absolutely.
than the periodic table or whatever,
Yeah. The order
because
of the planets. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, the I'm trying to think back, the Pythagorean theorem. Now,
There you go.
do I need to know the name of it? No, I just need to know how to do it, right? Like what's the use for it? So in this, what are kids learning? Kids are learning how to deal with uncertainty. They are learning how to deal with change, because the reality of it is and this isn't me being overly critical of the education system. And I think most people who will listen to this will probably agree, and they'll probably start clapping when they hear this. But we teach kids, and the education system, especially here in the United States as a whole,
Mhm.
is a very fairy tale way of aligning them up for the real world, right?
I
We
agree.
don't, we,
Especially the whole concept of teaching to a test. That's not teaching them. I have to teach you how to think, how to, be a critical reader, how to, there's so many other skills. And unfortunately, because we try to quantify education in so many ways, that we lose kids and we don't prepare them for what is going to be a very different world. It's like teaching your kids to code. Okay, but that coding that they're learning is not going to be the same code 15 years from now. We can't even imagine what that is right now, right? We can't even imagine what it is. So how am I developing you know, a, you know, a smart child who can read and think critically, who can form their own opinions, who understands the difference between argument and debate, right? Who understands, those types of key elements that will carry you no matter what the cultural shift will be.
absolutely. So I grabbed my I grabbed my transcript because you said something, and I kind of want to hit on it because um, I think it matters, right? You talked about testing and what does, maybe you're not the greatest student, right? So my background is, I built an online business with the last $1,500 I had to my name, and grew it into an international empire and all these different things. I use the word empire because it sounds really, really cool. And,
Own it. Own it,
yeah.
Shane. Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a rundown of my performance in some of the relevant classes.
Okay.
Because part of this as well is to say, hey, I want to reinforce what you just said in a real world example. So mathematics, the highest math class that I took, that I passed, was algebra 2. Okay. You're probably teaching algebra 2 in 8th grade now. I got a 63 the first semester and a 62 the second semester. Now, here where I went to school, anything over a 60 is a D, 60 to a 69 is a D, 70 to
Right.
70, that. So I took introduction to business. Okay. Introduction to business, I got a 71. Okay. Um, computer applications, right? Started an
Mhm.
online business, grew this thing internationally. I got a pretty good idea of computers. 64. Um, here's a great one. I do all the cooking at my house.
Oh,
My wife cannot boil water. Okay. And she knows I say that. She will agree with you.
it's all
Um,
about balance in the relationship. You can cook, she can, yeah, something else.
well, yeah. So we have so it's funny you say that. We have an agreement that says, "Hey, I'll cook, you clean up, and you put away. I'm not
Same
gonna."
here.
And
Same
she
here.
has
Great
no
agreement.
problem with it. The stress of trying to figure out what to eat, she doesn't want any part of it. If it was
Mhm.
up to her, or when I travel, if that we didn't have family nearby to cook and bring meals, they would eat cereal every night for dinner. Right? They'd be, and they would be fine. They would love it,
Right.
and they would be fine. So in foods, I got a 33, right?
Oof. Okay.
I can cook like we have I can just throw some tartar sauce together from scratch. I can throw like I
Yeah,
really actually cook. Like I can make homemade bolognese sauce. I can
right.
actually chef. I can
But
chef.
on paper you can't. If
On
I was just to
paper,
go
I
by
can't. Uh,
on paper, on the testing of Shane Howard, there would be no way you would ever develop yourself into a chef.
correct. On
Mhm.
paper, I shouldn't be able to. Um, I shouldn't be able to run a business, right? Um, foreign language, I got a 67. I don't really know, I shouldn't be able to communicate with people in different languages, right? Um, political science, I got a 48, but I've almost thought about running for city council to
Mhm.
win just to
Mhm.
prove a point because my teacher in political science was the former mayor of the town that
Oh,
I grew up in. So,
wow.
yeah, so I take a lot of pride in that,
Mhm.
in being exactly what you addressed back before I started. That is, we don't know. I don't think you gave your husband a test or he gave you a test that says, hey, before we get married and before we proceed in this relationship, I need to know if you meet these certain requirements, right? Because the
Mhm.
reality of it is, if we did that, none of us would ever get married. And,
Right.
you know, so, so we're operating in this world, in this fairy tale of, I've lost a lot. We lose a lot. We
Mhm.
don't teach kids how to deal with failure. We don't teach kids how to deal with the anxiety that comes along with that. We don't teach kids how to deal with people telling us no, right? I appreciate you telling me no.
Mhm.
I sometimes now I have ADHD and I push boundaries. Sometimes I will almost put myself out there in a way,
Mhm.
just the thrill of you might tell me no, right? And we have to go about a different way. So like the things that these kids are learning,
Mhm.
the adaptability to change their learning process to now all of a sudden start, like my daughter's very, very smart. She's in gifted and talented. She's in fourth grade, and the
Wow.
first couple of days in distance learning. So my wife's going to the school. They're kind of doing a hybrid method, or you could
Mhm.
do all online. So my two kids that are home decided, hey, we just want to work from home. We'd like to do that until it's safer. We gave them the option, right? Like
Right.
that's up
Right.
to you. And she comes to me and she's like, oh, man, I'm stressed out, or I'm like, it's just a rough day. And I'm like, it's not a rough day, like it could be a lot worse. So let's work through it. If she's like, well, the internet, and we have gig internet here where I'm at. We have really good internet. She's like, well, we need to do something about the internet. I was like, we don't need to do anything about the internet. And I said, tell me what the issue is. Well, I'm on there and we're on, and like, I just keep getting kicked off. And I was like, that's not your internet. That's your teacher's end of things. And that's
Mhm.
what's happening. Oh,
See,
and
yeah. In teaching, there is a mentality, and I think it's pushed externally too onto teachers. We have to teach kids how to be successful. Teach kids how to be successful. Teach kids how to be successful. You know what, Shane? I also want to teach kids how to react when they're not successful, because in life is not like, oh, I'll turn 16 and I'll do this, or I'll turn 18, or I turn 21 and suddenly there's a rainbow with a pot of gold or something. I firmly believe I have to teach kids what to do when they fail, when they make a mistake, when they set that goal and they don't reach it, that A, it's not the end of the world, but B, this is how, it's the question of how do you teach perseverance? How do you teach resilience? That we are at an unprecedented time right now to teach our kids resilience, to
well, and
teach
you're
them.
teaching them even
Yeah, yeah.
like passively in your household, right? So,
Mhm.
so if you're constantly, on high anxiety and you and your husband are having all these conversations that are stressing y'all out, they see that, right? If you were to talk to my kids, I'm very proud to say that if you were to talk to my kids, there's a part of them, they know what's going on, but they have no idea what's
Yeah.
out there. They have no idea what's going on because look, we deal with it and we figure
Mhm.
it out. And, dad has groceries delivered once a week to the house, or, we're not going out to eat, or we're not going out and doing these things.
Mhm.
We just had to, so my wife's grandparents just had to be put into a nursing home 2 weeks ago. And my daughter is used to going, we had kind of created a bubble. So my daughter was used to going over there all summer and singing. Now it's like, oh, you can't do that. But there's positives. Now Granny has other people she can spend time around. She can be social,
Mhm.
and she can do these things. And it's like we got to find there's a positive in every scenario. And you're right.
Mhm.
Like, we teach kids in this world that we have to be like, it's not, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
That's like, it's kind
And
of like
work your
being
hustle.
married, right?
Like find your passion and work your hustle. And it's like, well, no.
You don't even know what that is, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah. And your passion, I mean, think about what you were passionate about at 18, right, Shane, or 16, and what are you passionate, like that changes throughout your life. There are a few people in this world, there are very, who are called to a profession very early in a passion. My father was like that. He was when he was 5 years old, he knew he wanted to be a fighter pilot. He went and he did that and so much more. But those people are rare in life. And if we're
sure.
not, I think culturally we send these wrong messages of, teach them to be, I want to teach you to be successful, but I also want you to understand that when you fall down, you get back up.
It's
And there's going to
okay.
be,
Yeah.
and it's okay. Is it fixable? Okay. If it's fixable, then we can fix it. If it's not, okay, let's learn and move on. But we have to embrace, especially I think right now with what's going on with COVID, Jane, I think we have to teach kids, we, yeah,
Deal with the
things are
unexpected.
deal with the unexpected. Things are going to change, and it's okay.
Yeah. We
And it's
learned
not
that as an
fixable.
adult. We know
Right.
that, right? It's kind of like being married, right? Marriage is not what you think it is, right? When you're a kid, right?
No.
It's not. And even more so today, there's so many different styles of marriages and different
Mhm.
things, right? And in life, we have to go through and we have to deal with the uncertainty of what happens, right? It's like having a kid. People will, when you find out that you've got a kid on the way, everybody in the world gives you advice and they tell you
Yes.
what to do and do this. Listen, I had my first child when we came home at 21. I can tell you right now, when we got in the car and we were pulling off, in my mind, I thought, what? They're gonna they're gonna let me leave with this human? Like,
Yes.
I don't have any idea what to do. Right. And
Like,
Google wasn't like it is now. So I mean, now you've got it easy. Now back then, I'm like, I don't
I
know,
don't
what are we doing? Like,
know.
they're crying. What does that mean? I couldn't tell you. Don't
Yeah.
know. So you deal with these uncertainties as an adult, but the
Mhm.
kids are learning to deal with them now. And I think there are definitely some benefits that are
Mhm.
coming out. I think this will be the end of standardized testing. The SAT and ACT are going away,
Mhm.
and we'll see these different things going. Um, Let me ask you this: what's one thing that happened in your first year of teaching, and you were like, "Oh my goodness, what have I got myself into?" Did
Oh,
you have that moment?
I did. I probably had several. I
Okay.
probably had several. I have a wide variety of students in my classroom. I have a very diverse classroom. Most of the students I teach are from working class to middle class. They're not, their parents are the founders of Google kind of thing. So that's the part of Silicon Valley that I teach in. And I think the moment was I had a child in my class who very clearly had some, at least to me, some learning issues. And the parents had been advised to have, tests done and tests run. And you knew there were other things going on mentally, but I didn't know quite that was just going to be put on my plate. Like, okay, well, this is your student, so you get to handle it. And it's, you know, you walk that fine line with parents of trying to walk the journey together with them and saying, we need to get your daughter tested and we need to do this so that we can better understand, we can better teach. And I think that the varying levels, I knew I would have different learners, but I didn't realize I would have someone who was a little bit more off of the one end there. And then trying to put in steps for her to improve, but knowing that I wasn't going to be able to move her where I thought she could go, because she had learning differences that hadn't been identified, or at least hadn't been officially identified. And so I think it's a challenge when you think, if you can just do this, like just show me this. And she wasn't capable of that. And so you have to kind of adjust yourself a little bit. I think that was a moment where I thought, this is beyond my knowledge. Like this is beyond my knowledge of what to do for this child, for this student. So I think that was probably a major wake up moment for me of when I firmly believe every child is made in the image and likeness of God, imago Dei. And so I'm not going to judge that child for that, because you never know what's going on at home. Sure. And you never know what kind of background. And we've had that conversation, that they're coming from. But I was really at a loss of what to do, and it took, again, I have, great support from fellow teachers and a great, principal who was like, let's talk about this. What can we do and what should be our expectations with this child, with this student? And that really helps calm me. But, coming from the business world, I'm like, no, it's a problem. I need to solve it. And I need to, I need to create a pathway plan, and we're going to get this. And it's like, no, that's not how human beings work. That's not the instant result that I was so hoping for. Like, here's the problem, here's the solution.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times it goes how we're preconditioned to say, hey, why aren't you fitting into what this is? So I think it's really good that you're able to adjust with that. I think it's awesome to hear. And I think that's a positive thing. And kind of what we want to share throughout, doing this podcast is to be able to show people, hey, hear the side story of, you have a really good supporting cast around you. And, that matters for the teacher who is the 15th year teacher who's going to listen to this. And maybe it sparks a thought process where they say, hey, Miss Jones next door to me, this is her second year here. I need to pop in and check on it. We don't really connect. We don't really gel, but I just need to pop in and just say, hey, are you okay? Is there anything, if you want to grab your lunch and come over at lunch break and, sit down and have a chat, or, if you want to, let's go grab some dinner tonight and, maybe just talk about it. Those things matter so that you can understand a little bit. Again, much the same as the kids, as adults, we can go through that too. Is you never know what somebody else is going through.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, and I think we get in the busyness of the world, we forget. And I think this is why social media too is such a distraction for us, is we think that if I like something that you did, that somehow we've connected, and you really feel that, as opposed to just reaching out and saying, hey, can we just grab lunch or just chat for a little bit more? Yep. I just want to hear what's going on with you. Or I really need to talk through, I don't have a clue what I don't know what to do. Right. Yep. This kid won't turn in any work.
And a lot of times that's the best way to do it. Right. So I learned very early in running a business and building a company that how I operate from a leadership standpoint is very much, I work for my staff. I never liked using the word employees. I never used the word boss. I hate those terms. So for me, it was always about, I'm working for you. So if I'm working for you, I'm providing you with a consistent environment to provide you with whatever you need to be successful. And if you're not being successful, then there's something I'm doing wrong. It's taking that accountability from a leadership standpoint, something that we could probably use a lot throughout this entire country in some ways.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point right there, and I want to tap on it, because you as a leader for your company, you remove obstacles so that your team members, employees, we'll call them employees, can be successful. You remove obstacles. And I feel like for a lot of in the education community, whether it be external to that community, we put in obstacles to letting teachers teach and letting teachers do what they do best. This national conversation about, should we go, is anyone talking to the teachers, really saying, what's this like for you in the classroom? Now I'm not in a risk category, but I have fellow teachers who are older or who have, asthma or some other pre-existing condition makes them more risky. Are we listening to their voices? Instead, everybody's externally placing their expectations. And in addition, we put obstacles in the way. Like, no, I need you to turn in this before you can do this. Well, where's our trust happening? And how are you as a leader removing those obstacles? It's the same thing as teaching. How am I removing obstacles from any of my students so that they can have the smoothest path onto learning? And it sounds like you do that with your employees, right? Stepping back instead of saying, let me add this all in, you're moving it back.
Well, in a lot of ways, you're right. So it's, we talked a little bit about the education needs to be, I don't want to say customized, but taught how the student teaches. Yes, students need to be in a great environment. The best learning environment is definitely in-person time with their teachers and those kind of things. But what kind of education are they really getting if that teacher is scared to death that they're going to get something and die? And that's working in the back of their mind. I mean, let's be honest. Like you're not Superman, you're not Superwoman, right? Like let's be realistic about this. And I can tell you in most workplaces, not just the education world, there's that mentality of let's treat everybody equal. And there's a difference in treating everybody equal and treating everybody fair.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
fair is if you have a child at home who has cancer, we're going to make an adjustment for you and allow you to work from home and teach distance learning. And and this is what I say to leaders about this, is if you have staff that then turn around and say, well, wait a second, what about me? Then that's a culture that you've created to where, because what should be happening is your staff should be coming to you and saying, if you're doing it right, your staff should actually be coming to you and saying, hey, Shane over here has he's got a child at home who's going through some cancer treatment. Is there any way we can set them up and allow them to do some of the distance learning? Because I think that it would really help with the stress, because she's coming into work. Like, I know of a family here that is going on, and we're not giving an option to do any distance learning. And now they can't even go home because their child is going through some cancer treatment. So they're actually having to stay somewhere else because they can't take the chance on bringing it back. So now you don't even get to see your child at all. Like that, creating that environment for that teacher is worse than not having those kids in the classroom at all, because now she's carrying that with her. Right. And we're all human, and you can only carry that with you for, you can only carry so much burden. I've got big shoulders. I can carry a lot. But even Batman gets tired sometimes too.
Yeah, you can't carry the load all by yourself for that long. I mean, even like you said, even Batman gets tired. Part of the challenge of right now is that we are so desperate to get back to a regular state, to get back to more normal activities. And school is this massive component for it, especially for working parents, right? Suddenly to have your children learning at home while you're working at home, can be overwhelming and chaotic. It's like, well, let's just get them back and then everything will feel more normal. But you know what? We're not at that stage. The 1918 Spanish flu took 2 years for us to kind of get through. And yet we're so desperate to
quarantine fatigued,
habituation, that we're willing to say, I want you to play, and this is going to be sacrilegious because I know I'm from the South here, but I want you to play football so I can be entertained and have a sense of normalcy despite your health risk. I want you to go to school, despite the health risk, because I need this sense of normalcy, because it's stressful to be not that way. What's the harm in waiting 6 more months? If I can get everybody to wear their mask, socially distance, and wash your hands, we'll all be back in school. We'll be back to normal. But everybody, we have to have a cultural agreement that that's what matters.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, you need to go back into school despite the fact that your child's in cancer treatment. And like you said, we can't afford, quite honestly, to customize education for everybody, but we can make more accommodations and make more shifts than we currently do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a friend of mine who's a teacher up in Indiana, and he and I communicate. We've kind of been that male mental support system for each other throughout this, of hitting each other. Hey, you okay? You good? I'm working from home, just trying to figure out a whole new career and these different things. And we laugh and we joke that there's a lot of people over the last 6 months realized how much they hate being a parent and realized how much they hate their spouse, because now they're literally locked in the house dealing,
Yeah.
and they're like, I don't like this person. I don't want to be around you every day.
Well, and
You know,
6 months in, yeah, the walls are going like the space for each other is smaller,
yeah,
and it's
like
yeah, it's definitely a
some
challenge.
parents are celebrating that school is open so that
Mhm.
they don't have to be around their kids every day.
Yeah.
And and that is, you said it earlier, the teachers are frontline workers. They're essential workers.
Mhm.
They are a huge part of the economy keeping going, but yet we don't treat them, or we don't compensate them as such. So
Well, we also don't have, on the flip side, I keep waiting. Now, Google just announced today that they're going to have Fridays off. They're going to go to a four-day work week, or that's what their their PR people are saying right now. But I also don't see, and I keep looking here in Silicon Valley for these large companies or any company to step in and say, okay, working parents, how do we help you? We know
yeah,
you have kids at home learning. How do we help you? And I'm not saying that companies have to take on the social structures of support, but why isn't somebody stepping up as a leader and saying, more than half of our workforce are working parents. In order to help them so that they can thrive as our employees, we're going to help support them, by being flexible or by providing equipment or whatever it happens to be. But I don't see any companies really out there leading,
yeah.
saying, we're going to help our working parents by doing XYZ. Instead, it's going back to working parents figure it out. Okay, schools, you figure it out so that you can help working parents. But again, we create this vacuum where culture says everything to do, but doesn't provide that social support.
I agree. I agree. And it's a huge opportunity for local businesses to really
Yes,
step up and play a part
it's a
in these
great story.
communities,
Yes.
to do that and to start coming up with some ideas of how to. And I think we'll see that.
Yeah.
Somebody's working on it right now. We just haven't heard about it yet, right? Of that plan to roll out
Mhm.
in those communities.
I'm waiting to hear those stories. Those are the stories in the support of education that I'm saying, in the support of working parents. And I imagine, so you said you have gig internet right there. But imagine if gig internet came to its customers and said, would you donate, $5 a month so that we can provide internet to,
Yeah.
you know,
So my
absolutely.
community, so
Yeah.
my community has done some similar things. So they have
Absolutely.
set up in the local parks. They have set up some hotspots
Oh, wow.
for internet, so that for families who don't have internet, or I think for some
Mhm.
families who just want to go pull up their car and just go sit in the car and let their kid work and maybe
Yeah.
have a different view rather than look at the four walls in their house. I know some of the churches here locally have come up. And then what the schools here have done as well is they turn some buses into
Mhm.
hotspots. So they're setting
Wow.
buses like in the school parking lot. So then certain hours each day, you can go sit in the parking lot of the school and you can actually tap into the internet and do those things. So,
And those are the stories we need to hear. And it doesn't need to come from the government, right? It
yeah,
doesn't, because government solving something takes 20 years and it'll
yeah,
cost 50 times as much. But what are our communities doing to create this supportive environment for what we say will return to normal school? There won't be normal school again. Like you
correct.
said, this has shown us that schooling needs to change. I know, for example, we have, where I teach, even if we make it back in person this year, we have families who said, no, we want to stay online all year,
Yeah,
either due to health issues. And so I don't know there's going to be a return to normal. So we need to look culturally around us to how do we support our community, because we all have a vested interest in having kids be educated. We all have a vested interest in parents, supporting working families in this country so they're not so stressed out, so that we create healthy home environments, right? So how do we do that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those ongoing discussions that I'm excited to see. And and to be fair, I feel for the superintendents and the administrators and those people having to make some of this, because you're not going to make everybody happy.
No, yep, exactly.
I'm
Somebody's going to be very unhappy. Somebody's
I'm
going to be
massive
very unhappy. Hmm.
absolutely, I'm massively empathetic to that. So, all right, so we're going to wrap this up.
Okay.
And I'm gonna end it with a couple questions.
Okay.
Sometimes they are the same questions that I've asked other people. Sometimes they are more tailored to who you are. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
That's a good setup there, Shane. That's a good
That's
setup.
okay. That's okay. I'll try not to get too personal.
Okay.
Um, let's see what, and I typically do them on the spot because I could pick up bits and pieces through the conversation. Um, what is one food item that you miss from the South that is hard to find in the area that you live in now?
There's a lot. Really, I would say biscuits, but I make a really mean biscuit. So but I miss really good biscuits, but fried chicken. I know
Fried
that just
chicken.
sounds, I mean, that's so general
Yeah,
Southern,
yeah.
but just fried chicken and, like the
I,
Sunday afternoon, tailgate, you go
yep.
pick up some fried chicken kind of thing. So
Yep.
I
I
think that,
hear that a lot and
mhm,
barbecue a lot. Like a
yeah,
good barbecue.
yeah.
Um,
I've got some barbecue secrets, but yeah, so some of those I can kind of mimic. My husband's originally from Louisiana, so we try to keep the Southern food alive here at home. But,
it's good Cajun
you know,
food.
oh, yeah, 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 he's very good at it. So, that is such a good question. Biscuits is always top of mind because you just know you go to different places in the South, you get different style of biscuits. So either biscuits or fried chicken.
Okay. Okay. Good answer. Um, and now we'll go with a tech question. What
Okay.
is one thing that you had learned in your business experience
Mhm.
from a technology standpoint that made it easy to transition and less overwhelming into this whole teaching online situation?
Wow, that's a really good question. I had an idea, but it wasn't on the tech side. So,
Because
I think on the
I envision in marketing, right? You're putting a lot of
yeah,
slides together. You're putting a lot of, so
yeah, like I
I
knew
would
how to
imagine that's a transition that was easy to flow into.
easy to flow into of like, all right, now I'm going to be presenting remotely. So it's like in business, you do that with slide decks and stuff, and you get really comfortable with that. I was very comfortable being on the camera, but not necessarily teaching. So I think I knew how to use the technologies from business, the Google Suite. I knew how to put together a good presentation. I know what made a good slide. Don't pack it too full of information. So that probably was one. I I want to add one more thing though, Shane,
Okay.
because you triggered this thought in my mind that what I learned from the business world that I take with me here is that a lot of times it's not a talent gap. It's not an intellectual gap for a child or in your company, like with one of your employees. It's not a talent gap, it's a focus gap. And even more so with digital learning, the challenges I see with my students, it's because they're so distracted, even while we're online, even while, because they've got, the cell phone to reach their parents. So they're texting with their friends or they've got their game system in there. And I tell this, I tell this to parents, I tell this to my students that it's not a talent gap. You can do this. It's a focus gap. Can you make 10 minutes of just straight focus time, 20 minutes of just straight focus time to get things done? So that's something I definitely took from
Awesome.
my business career into this one.
Awesome. So this is something I've been meaning to do and I always forget. So now I'm going to
Okay.
give you the opportunity to ask me one question before we
I
wrap
get
it up.
one. Okay. I get one question for you to wrap it up. I think my one question for you would be as a student, what do you wish a teacher or someone in the school community had done for you? What could they have done differently to reach you where you are at? Meaning not to move you, but where you are at, Shane.
Yep.
What was something one teacher could have done for you?
So that's actually one. It's a really good question. It's also really easy for me to answer, and really it would be pull me aside and say, "Hey, I can tell something's going on. Tell me what it is. Like how can I help you? And if you're not comfortable with sharing with me what's going on, um, at least acknowledge that something is going on, and
Mhm.
let's figure out a way. I know you're not getting this. Let's figure out a way. Tell me what of anything we've covered. Tell me what is the most interesting part of any of it, and then start to peel back the layers and I've shared this story on multiple different occasions. So that happened, but not in that way. And when those conversations finally happened, I was 16, 17 years old. It was my high school counselor. And at that point, it was a completely different conversation, more so pulling me aside and using language she probably is not allowed to use and saying, hey, get your head out of your hind end. Let's figure this out. Like you gotta figure this out. Like, what do I need to do to help you get your stuff together? Right. So in elementary school, back then they had erasers, right? So we used the chalk erasers.
I
Something that
remember that.
something that a lot of people don't know is how they actually cleaned those erasers. So the janitors would actually go around and pick them up at the end of each day. And in the janitor's closet, there's this gigantic, I say gigantic, it's like this huge vacuum, and you run it across so it sucks the chalk out
Oh,
of into this big bag, and then you go dump the bag. And I'm sure they repurposed it. I think maybe even somebody came and picked it up like once a week or something. Like a lot of chalk, right?
okay.
So you would go and do that. And the janitor there, Mr. Satterfield, I know him this like it was the back of my hand. He would come around every day, he'd pick up the erasers, and he would pick up the trash, and he'd start to come around at the end of the day. Well, it was always a treat. Sometimes he would ask a student, hey, do you want to come help me? And you'd kind of go around. So it got to the point to where I was like at the end of the day, I'm like checking the door, like, where you at? Like, come on. Like, I got to see if I can get in. So it became a regular thing for me to do. And it was an escape for me. It was like, hey, man, I can roam the hall. I don't have to, like, I can do it without
Yeah.
getting in trouble. And I don't. So I did that. And, you know, it got to be like a very regular thing that we did. And one day, and I'll never forget this, and I tell this story a lot. He reached down, he kind of put his hand on my shoulder. We were walking, and he's like, you know what, buddy? He said, oh, buddy, he said, me and you are a lot alike. We ain't that much different. And he was a black man,
Mm,
two completely different backgrounds. Um, no, on paper you look at it, and here's this older black
yeah.
gentleman, and here's this young white kid. To society, it didn't make sense. To me, it was no big deal. I totally got it. Fast forward, a really cool how that whole story kind of comes full circle. Fast forward, I played varsity basketball as a freshman in high school. Our only senior in my freshman year was his son Jerry, who we
Mm,
ended up developing a friendship. And Jerry knows some of this story. I don't know if he knows, all of it. And I'm sure at some point he'll hear, as many times as I tell it, he'll hear about it, or somebody will point it out to him. But that stood out to me. Very few teachers, because I was also the kid who would act like I was sick on a regular basis because I wasn't sleeping at night because parents were fighting in the house, and it was just
mhm.
crazy. So I would always act like I'm sick. Back then, you could go. We had like a padded thing in the
Yeah,
nurse's station. You could go
yeah, you
lay
feel the way
down, and there. I'm sure there's not an official count. I guarantee you, throughout 5 years of 6 years of elementary school, I guarantee you, I had 200 days or more in the in the nurses lounge, maybe more than that,
down.
because I would just act like I was sick. And so they had to have known um that something was going on. It's like, and it's not that they didn't, I don't think it's that they didn't care. It's just that, like, you didn't like they never connect. And then, maybe I'm asking them to do more. I don't know. Like,
No, but out of decorum, right? A lot of times we say, well, we're just not going to ask.
yeah,
Just, I'm just not going to ask. But it takes that one adult, like you said, Mr. Satterfield, to just make that connection with you. Or to, what I think perhaps is Mr. Satterfield saw you, Shane, and acknowledged you as an individual, right? And made that connection. And that's like, you still carry that today.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. So I've always kind of been that guy who, like, I don't, now maybe it's also, I don't understand it because I'm that person who, you know, I can recall driving down the road and there's a car in front of us and they're all over the road, clearly intoxicated. We come to a
Mhm.
stoplight. I park the car at the stoplight, get out and walk up to the car and, like, hey, what's going on? I can tell you're drunk. You're arguing. I've taken the keys and thrown them out and be like, look, I'm calling the police. Like, I've been in an environment where you see a domestic disturbance and some people turn a blind eye, get in
Mhm.
the middle of it. Like, I'm just not I'm not one of those people who,
You
um,
have to say something, even if you risk embarrassing yourself, say something.
people. So part of my journey and my mission through life, whether it's teachers or whether it's kids or wherever, is helping give people a voice who don't have a voice, or who society has said your voice doesn't matter as much as the next person's. And
Mhm.
that's a big part about what I do. So I do appreciate that question, and you definitely reinforced my reason now for asking. I'm gonna add that too. So you played guinea pig for a couple things today,
I
um, and,
appreciate the
and
chance. Mhm.
and I appreciate it. And you've been great, and I really appreciate you coming on. I think you embody what we talk about here, and that's accepting those challenges of what you guys do as educators is a thankless job, and you wake up every single day and you look at those challenges, because a kid could walk in and tell you he's the greatest thing in the world, or he could walk in and tell you the most horrific, scary thing you've ever heard come out of a child's mouth. And somehow you've got to figure out how to,
Mhm.
make him feel secure, and at the same time mentally process it, and at the same time figure out how you're going to help. And
Yeah.
we're thankful for that, and that is a massive, massive thing. I would actually love to have you on later in the school year, maybe the second half of the school year, to hear more about how things have kind of changed and evolved and those kind of things. And I appreciate you taking time out of your holiday to come in and
Shane.
um, and
Mhm.
share your story and share your journey.
Well, thank you for amplifying the voices of teachers and of those within the education community. It's certainly, I don't think it's a challenge that's going to go away, but we have to keep picking up that challenge. I also would encourage for anyone who's in the business world who's thinking about making a huge career change, just do it. The time will go by anyway, and life's too short not to just kind of follow where you're being led.
I
So
agree. I agree. Well, enjoy the rest of your holiday,
thank
and
you.
I appreciate you coming on, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. I would love that, Shane. Thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Cheers.